First, I want to thank Diego for what he's done putting this together. I mean, this is, third year in a row of something that's not easy, and having to deal with adversity through it. And I think that every single person that's been to even one of these, let alone multiples, is better off for them having been here. So thank you, Diego. I also realize it's been a long 3 days. You might feel like the guy in the Matrix that got taught how to fly the helicopter in 13 seconds at this point. People are tired. I get kind of the last word here, so I don't want anybody falling out. So I want to get everybody revved up. If you guys seem pretty revved up from the last three guys, but I got my own way. Who saw my duck talk? Yeah, we're going to do that again, so you help the other kids, okay? So when we started doing the ducks, I thought I wanted this cool thing to hook people into permaculture and trick them. So I figured, what is trickier than a baby duck in a bathtub? So I used these little baby ducks. I got people, and then like 7 episodes in, now let's talk about the hydrology of swales. And then I'm like, we could promote this Duck Chronicles thing with a shirt. So my designer came up with this, and what it says on the back, for those who can't read it, is Duck the System. It's a triple entendre. So I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1, and when I get to 1, every single person in here yell loud, Duck the System. It'll wake you right back up. It'll make you feel good. And if you don't do it, I'm going to get on a plane and go home, and I'm not going to present. All right? So here we go, loud. And I'm not helping. I'm just going to count down. My voice is strained. I got to get through this with you guys. 3, 2, 1.
Duck the System!
Feels good, doesn't it? All right, so I was actually going to lead off with the Fukuoka quote. I'm glad I changed it now. I actually think this does fit mine a little bit better anyway, though. Though the problems of the world are increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. Bill Mollison. That was one of the first things that really hooked me on permaculture. And I seldom disagree with anything Bill said, and I'm not disagreeing with it here, but there's always more than one way to look at something. And many of the solutions, as we'll discover through this presentation, are simple to do, but they're not simple to implement because there's hurdles and things in the way that prevent us from doing them. There's some things that would be a really great thing to do to make the world better that are illegal, just like Joel Salatin wrote about in his book. But we're going to start at a different point. I want to actually tell you guys a little bit about my background when I was a teenager and where I grew up, because I don't think I've ever actually publicly told kind of the story of how I became a permaculturist in the first place, going back this far. This is a place called Minersville, Pennsylvania. Who's been there? Not a hand. Whoa! 2. Well, you've been there, yeah, my wife. 4. That never happened before. Anyway, this is kind of a beautiful part of the world. Just across the top of that mountain on the backside, we call that Pine Hill, is where I shot my first deer, which is a big deal in rural Pennsylvania. They still close school for the first day of deer season. It's kind of a rite of passage. We also picked blueberries, blackberries, wild strawberries up there. We foraged for ram's head mushrooms, maitake, hen of the woods, all different types of mushrooms, but that was like the big one, And it was really, in some ways, an idyllic place. It also had a history of being a mining town. So this is actually about 100 yards south of my father's home that he still lives in today. And it's the entrance to the high school. That road there on the left goes up to the high school, Minersville High School, Battle of Miners. And, coal looks pretty when you landscape it like this. But there's a dark side to coal, and it's one people seldom really hear about or talk about. This is actually what's called an active breaker. So this is actually breaking coal from big pieces to little pieces so it can be built. You see the black stuff all around it? That's all a waste product. We call that coal slush. The place I shot my deer, that first deer, was only about 100 yards from a place that looked just like this, except all the buildings were collapsed because it was abandoned in the 1930s. Other than that, it still looks like that. We called it the Black Desert. Nothing will grow there. It was an interesting thing growing up in this town. You might imagine a lot of people were employed by the coal industry or things related to the coal industry. These were men that loved to hunt and fish. They gardened, they planted things. They wanted to take care of the earth. It was a different time. We're going back to the 70s and 80s here. So it wasn't with this new wave of environmentalism. It was just a common sense. I don't like this. All of them hated it, but they were all stuck in it. And no one really knew what to do about it, and I didn't either. But I did have a grandfather that taught me to take care of a garden. We had about a quarter-acre garden, and I took food to all the older people in the community, so there was a seed planted in me as a gardener. But I also knew there was nothing for me in this place, and this was kind of the worst thing that I saw. This hurt me as a fisherman. This is a stream, and for those that are a little bit further back, that water is orange. And that water is orange because sulfur and iron leach out of the mines into the groundwater and oxidize. Both sulfur and iron will oxidize at high concentrations in water. When something oxidizes, what happens? Oxygen comes out, so everything in there dies. My grandfather told me that this particular stream, that there was a time when brook trout ran up that stream that looked like salmon when they were spawning. I thought he was a crazy old man. He wasn't. Not this particular branch. This particular branch of the Schuylkill still has its problems. But the part he was talking about, my wife, son, and I caught brook trout in that stream in 2002. So there is hope even there. And it wasn't permaculture that did that. It was common sense. Let's stop the mines from leaching. But this is what I grew up with. I joined the Army to get out of there because as much as there was good in it, there was no opportunity for me. I was far away from permaculture. I came back from the Army and I thought, man, this place has changed. It took me about 3 weeks to realize the place hadn't changed at all. I had an experience one night where I sat down with an old buddy from high school, a bunch of guys hanging out. They were talking about their things that didn't matter to me anymore. I took 2 beers, walked away, and sat for 20 minutes in peace and quiet. And you'd thought I'd flicked a booger on somebody. It was like, what's wrong with you? You know, what's wrong with you? Why don't you just fit back in the way you did before you left 3 years ago? So I took a walk to get my head. I walked from central Pennsylvania to the White Mountains in New Hampshire. Little walk. This is at the end of that walk. This is in 1993, just before we're going to set into fall. That's me quite a whiles ago, right? I just got into town, got in a shower, got cleaned up, called my dad and said, I'm done now. Come get me. It was going to take him a day to get up there. So I got cleaned up and took the tram instead of hiking for a change. Went up on Cannon Mountain to take a picture. Ended up with this because as soon as I got up there, came in and socked it all in. And as soon as I came back down, it cleared up and was pretty blue. But that kid was still like, well, what do I do? This place isn't just, I still got to figure out what to do. I moved to Texas. I got hot on building a career. By 26, I was successful. By 30, I was getting really successful. We ended up moving back to Pennsylvania for a few years. I took a job in computer test equipment as a regional sales vice president. Did fairly well there, but we ended up deciding to come back to Texas. And I switched from sales to marketing, built success up with that, and became quite successful in corporate America. I was also miserable. But along that way, I found permaculture. And it started to rekindle the seed that was planted in me by my grandfather, teaching me how to garden. And I decided to use one of my old military skills. This is called supervising. And that's my son, Matthew, and this is us playing around with this little property we had in Arkansas. But the reason I put that there is I also wanted to know, did this stuff work? Could you do this? And this was a place that I bought before I figured out what permaculture was. So this whole little piece of scrubby stuff here was what was left after they pushed all the topsoil down there to put that house in. It was granite, as you can see the rocks and lumps. It was almost impossible to dig there. My wife was using like a pick to plant like tulip bulbs. That's how bad it was. But I had learned about swales, so I put a couple micro swales in with a mattock and a shovel. Did a little cover cropping. And this was 6 months later to that little piece of land. I was like, well, that works. It's a little grainy because it's out of a video still shot. But this is a close-up. The rest of the mountain was brown when this was going on. I knew it worked. This is just some daikon and some mustard. And there's wheat, vetch, alfalfa. That's all right in there. It gave me confidence that this stuff really worked. The property we're on now, I've showed some more in-depth pictures of this, but this is my property I live on now. About 2 years and 2 months ago. And the area I'm about to blow up is that bottom left corner there. And what you actually see in it, that weird looking orange spot there and there, that's actually white. That's exposed limestone. So that was 2.5 years ago. This picture was taken Monday. So we figured out how to heal land. Along the way, I realized, though, because I had gotten so wrapped up in corporate America and I'd become so miserable, I needed to figure out how to heal myself. This is me at the height of my success and the height of my weight. This is actually, this picture was taken on the 40th floor of Trump Plaza, or Trump Tower, when I was a consultant at Donald Trump. Before anybody gets mad at me, no, I did not tell him to run for president. And then this is a few years later. You know, I'm still not a guy that's going to be on the cover of Muscle and Fitness, but I was somewhere north of 300 pounds. I wouldn't even weigh myself there. This guy here looks a lot more like that kid on top of that mountain. So this is how this whole pathway took me back to healing myself and my land and my body. And the reason I decided to, instead of just going full-on entrepreneur on you guys today, kind of tell that story of transformation is that's what we're trying to get other people to do. But I've heard talk like we can't leave certain people behind. I don't want to leave anybody behind, but you can't drag somebody where you want them to go. You have to make them want to get there. They have to step up. They have to walk the trail, climb the mountain. They have to have a desire. And if you understand what did it for other people, you can start to see it in other people and lead them to it instead of trying to drag them. I believe in leading people. I do not believe in driving people. I changed because I knew there was a problem, flat out. I didn't know the scope of it, but I knew there was a problem. I also knew it would not be solved by the government. I knew these people arguing with each other on my TV were not going to fix these problems, that they had no solutions whatsoever, so it was up to somebody to do it. I knew I could only do a little bit, and I still feel like I'm only doing a little bit. This is a big problem, but I knew I could do something. And I was so tired of hearing people say somebody should do something. I thought, well, I'm somebody, so I'm going to do what I can. And it began that journey of transformation. And I got a little bit, I don't know what the word is, fanciful. I saw greening the desert, and I'm like, oh, we could do this anywhere. It'll be easy. And we could just put gardens in, and everybody will have food, and it'll be wonderful. And thanks to Mark Shepard, I really become aware of the scope of the size of the problem of feeding the world. What it takes to do that. It's a huge job. I've also realized how controlled the system is because I've tried to implement solutions only to have them shut down by codes and restrictions and things. And I'm like, I'm not trying to, build a nuclear bunker, guys. I'm trying to, plant trees and give people opportunity to get access to land. And the number one obstruction I've come up with is the government. And we have seen things with food legislation that's supposedly helping people that's not helping people, like the Food Safety and Modernization Act is a perfect example of that. But I've also figured something else out, really, really important. With the problem this big, we need everybody. I don't care what your political affiliation is, your race, your religious belief, I don't care what it is, we need everybody. Now, I don't mean everybody in is 100% of people, but we need everybody that will step up, and we need to be inviting every single person that's willing to take the walk with us, every single person. But I want to talk about the scope of the problem for a second, just to get it in your head. Here's some numbers. One average supermarket in America accounts for $516,000 in chains of weekly sales. One. How many gardens does it take to do that? 42,000 individual products. It'll occupy 46,000 square feet. There will be 37,000 plus supermarkets like this in America. Combined, they employ 3.4 million people. That's not even production. This is just delivery. Total sales nationwide, $638 billion annually. Think about how big that problem is if we're going to change the way we feed those people. And they operate, say whatever you want about them, they operate on a typical 1.5% profit margin. So they are efficient. And if we shut that system off tomorrow, we'd have a lot of hungry dead people really, really fast. And this is not what we're competing with. This is what we're trying to enter. This is what we're trying to exist alongside of. This is what we're trying to replace over time, because we can't replace it in a day. We can't replace it in a week. We can't replace this in a decade. But we got to start somewhere. And this is how big that problem is. And that's why we need everybody that we can get involved with this. To me, the only way we're going to be able to move forward here is we have to attract people of all walks of life at every level. And even though I just said, like, how many gardens would it take to fill one grocery store? We need backyards. We need backyard gardens. Backyard to broad acres. That needs to be exactly how inclusive we are. There should be no competition. You're doing something small, this guy's doing something big. What actually bothers me the most is when somebody says, well, all I've done is, well, you've done something, so good, keep doing it. It matters, it's important. We need to let politics end where the soil begins. Some of you know me personally, I'm pretty politically opinionated. I have some differences of opinion with many people in this room. But the second you put a shovel in your hand and you're fixing our planet, I don't care what your politics are. It doesn't matter one bit to me because we have a common goal. And again, just think of the last slide, how big that goal is. The minute we begin to put carbon in soil, we start the process of restoring life on our planet. And anybody that wants to do that with me is welcome. Please come along. We should never tell anyone doing better they're not doing good enough. That's another thing that bothers me, is to see somebody take a step in the right direction and then have them criticized because, oh, well, it's still this or it's still that. Hey, it's better than it was. Because how many of you started with one step? Like everybody? How many of you were eating permaculture perfect food, right, 10 years ago? How many of you didn't know the word permaculture 10 years ago? So when somebody takes a step in the right direction, encourage it. Imagine if we taught children to walk by criticizing this first step in the right direction because they did it wrong. Oh, you stupid baby, you fell over, you did it wrong. Parents, what do? That's great, come on, do some more. That's how we need to be. On some levels, we need to stop using the word permaculture. Anybody notice I called this presentation Taking Regenerative Agriculture Forward? The reason I did that was so I could make this point right now. When we are marketing what we're doing outward, right, guys, preaching to the choir, right? When we're marketing permaculture to people that don't know the word, we need to use other words that explain what it is to hook them and then reel them in. Use a gaff if you have to. Get them in the boat. Then say, it's okay, we're not going to fillet you. It's all right. Check this out. It's permaculture. It's good. It has ethics. It has morals. It has grounding. And it appeals to everybody that understands it. I've never actually had the opportunity to explain permaculture to anybody who said, that's a terrible idea. Not one time. But you got to get the opportunity. So if you need to use words like edible landscaping in your marketing, do it. Permaculture people know what that means too. That means that's a permaculture guy that's marketing to yuppies. I want to help him. Okay? That's the guy that figured out how to do permaculture in HOAs. He's awesome. So don't feel like you have to jam the word into everything you do. But trust me, I'm going to be doing permaculture for the rest of my life. And we have to make what we do economically viable. That doesn't mean there's not a place for charities and nonprofits and what have you. But if we're going to replace a $638 billion delivery of food in America, then guys, we need to be able to prove that we're economically viable because they're able to do it at a 1.5% profit margin. Who here makes a profit with your farm? Wow. Right. I hope you guys have your hands up all over 1.5% profit, right? So that's eye-opening, isn't it? But again, backyards of broad acres. A lot of people are going, well, I don't have a farm. One thing you should know, though, is you can have a farm in a backyard. It has been done, and it can be done. Now, I just said to let politics end. I'm going to ask you guys to trust me through these next two slides. I'm not trying to make a point that my view politically is correct. I'm trying to make a point about what's necessary to implement the solution. But I do want to point something out that's been said by both the founders of permaculture. We know who this guy is, right? David Holmgren. As a social movement, permaculture originated in the counterculture, applying an activist strategy to create a world we wanted rather than fighting to stop a world we didn't want. Early back-to-the-land self-sufficiency efforts outside the mainstream economy provided a context for early application of permaculture concepts. Although not overtly political, permaculture was influenced by both anarchist and libertarian philosophies. Bill Mollison, able to get more out with less words, said in an interview, "So it's a revolution, but permaculture is anti-political. There is no room for politicians, administrators, or priests, and there are no laws either. The only ethics we obey are care of the earth, care of people, and reinvestment to those ends." Now, what that actually means is it's all on our backs. We can't look for anybody else to fix the problem. And again, we need everybody. I don't exactly work well inside political systems. I don't work well with bureaucrats, but I'm so grateful that some of you can, that some of you do. We had a guy up here last night talking about terraforming 13 million acres of desert in Saudi Arabia. I mean, holy God. And you have to work with governments to do work on that scale. So we need people working inside the system and outside the system. But we can't expect the system to deliver the solution. We have to drag the system to the solution. Some of you will do it from the inside pushing, and some of us will do it from the outside trying to stay out of jail, right? But we're going to drag it. And dragging and pushing together works better than just doing one or the other. Kind of reinforcing that. Chapter 14 of the PDM is the one most PDC teachers just kind of, like, I got to get through it. It's the last one, and I got to get through it. To me, it's like the most important one in the book. But in 14.1 in the PDM, there's this quote: "Thus, the very first strategies we need are those that put our own house in order, and at the same time do not give credibility to distant or power-centered unethical systems." Bill Mollison, man, clap that up, right? I didn't write that. In 14.4, the opening paragraph is, "Systems of government are currently based on self-interest, economic pragmatism, belief in practical theory, and power-centered minorities, religious, military, capitalist, communist, familial, or criminal. Almost all groups set up competitive and adversary-oriented systems." Notice no one got a pass. Like, no political group got a pass on that. Everybody's under the bus, and the old man Bill's just driving it, right? Go, Bill, go, right? Okay. Again, though, I'm not trying to make a point politically. I'm trying to make an anti-political point. The answer is inside every single person in this room, every single person you ever teach, every single person you ever influence. We are the solution. As Bill says, we are the chickens, and the chickens do the work. But I'm going to be a duck. Ducks do work too. This is also from chapter 14. I had to cut it in half so it would fit on a slide. But this is actually how to set up a bioregion monetary system according to the Permaculture Designer's Manual. How many people have actually can admit it and say, you've never seen this? You didn't actually, yeah, all right. There's a few honest people, okay? But the top says, I know some of you can't read it, is it started by 3 or 4 people in a bioregion. 3 or 4. So if any of you live near each other and know 2 or 3 people that like this stuff, you could start this. What's really interesting, and I won't go through the whole thing, but it covers so much, including a LET system, which is, does everybody know what LETs are? Basically, you create your own money for your own system. Multiple small exchanges, and a nationwide exchange of products and services within these interconnected groups. On a more formal side, a regional revolving fund of money funds the establishment of other organizations. You have a small business center. This is basically Bill laying out how we can be expert local bankers for ourselves, running our own banks, our own insurance programs. And you notice, this is what's interesting. There's one little box here that says external trade. All of this is completely controlled by the people that set it up, using their own forms of value and exchange within those systems. This is great, but I got bad news for you. The problem is much of it's illegal. How many people know my original plan for Perma Ethos as a community? Yeah, I had a guy that came to PV1, loved what I was doing, but he worked for the FTC, said if you do it that way, they will put you in federal prison. because I wanted to make sure that people became part of it, could get a return of their money. Because I wanted to give money back to what you would call typically in a normal business the customer, and I was offering them something of value and publicly soliciting them. I was violating investor laws. Even though everybody that would have been involved would have signed a piece of paper that said, I completely understand this. They don't think you're smart enough to understand it. That's what it comes down to. They want to protect you from making your own decisions. So we found ways around it. I also want to talk about a couple of people that I find them to be heroes. Everybody know who this guy is? This guy rocks, okay? This is Ron Finley, for those of you who don't know. Ron is the guerrilla gardener. He just goes out and plants gardens. Doesn't ask permission, just does it. And if a garden goes away, somehow it shows up there again. Keep doing it long enough, people in the community actually start liking it, start getting upset when the city takes it away. And all of a sudden, one day, the city starts making allowances and exceptions and says, we think this is a good idea now. Okay? But this guy here, you guys know who he is? Brad Lancaster in Tucson, Arizona. This guy is a machine, a genius at harvesting water. Well, he figures out, hey, you know what? All this water rolling down the road, let's cut a section out of the curb, direct the water into a hole, plant a tree in it, see what happens. Turns out trees grow when you do that. So he does this, and he does it a little bit more, and he does it a little bit more, and he makes a few mistakes, but they are careful so that they don't let the mistakes get out of hand. They fix the mistakes. They kind of roll with it for a while. They transform a whole neighborhood, trees everywhere. They're getting products out of it. Who's seen the video, right? Pretty awesome, huh? So then they kind of let the city know, hey, guys, we're doing this, right? And the city looks at it, and instead of tearing it all out, goes, gee, these people are going to be really upset with us if we mess with this now. And all of a sudden, new city streets in Tucson have to be installed this way. And they're telling people putting subdivisions in, yeah, you want your permit, you have to have a certain amount of water harvesting along this model. Now, the thing about that is, do you know what Brad and Ron both did? They broke the law. They pulled instead of pushed. Now, I want to caution you. This does not mean, especially if you live in like Beverly Hills, to go home and get a concrete saw, okay? Or plant a guerrilla garden out in front of like, oh, I don't know, the mayor's house. But if you ever want to do that, I have a plan. So see, this is my plan to do this type of, I'll call it what it is, anarchy. You go and you get investors and you buy a deserted lot in a city and you perma-blitz it at night so that when the sun comes up, it's done. So you have a crack team that knows exactly what to do when they go in. You get it done, you call a press conference in the morning, and you give it to the city while the media videos it. And then go, there you go, yeah, tear that one out. Yeah. Yeah. We're doing one in Chicago next, right? I mean, I think that's the kind of creative solutions some of us need to be doing. And some of us need to be right in city councils and state governments and what have you. But forget the federal stuff. They're not listening, guys. Here's some things we need to understand. I look at government codes, regulations, etc., as design restrictions. That's what I see them as. They're just design restrictions. A mountain is a design restriction. A mountain of paper is a design restriction. Sometimes I can work with it. Sometimes I can work around it. Sometimes I can cheat. Sometimes I can go, that's not the place for it then. But in the words of Jeff Lawton, the more restrictions on a design, if the designer's good, the more elegant the design is. Bitcoin and blockchain technology opens up what I would call digitized lets. Right now, if you have a small group, you can clone Bitcoin with a guy with a little bit of technical knowledge and just start doing it. They're not going to bother you, you're too small. By the time they do want to bother you, you're too big. That's how Bitcoin worked. So we need to be thinking about how we can use technologies like that. I also want to point out the proper use of a nonprofit isn't what most people think it is. At least a lot of people that I meet, young people that are starry-eyed and happy about permaculture. Mark Shepard said here last year, and it wrinkled some noses and it made some people cheer, so it'll probably do the same again this year. But what he said is a nonprofit without a profitable entity attached to it is a professional begging organization. The proper use of a nonprofit is to discover a source of profit that is currently being taken away from the people producing it and going thousands of miles away in an unethical, unfair system and being used way over there to do something the people that created it don't want to support. And no matter what your political belief is, there's probably something that's done with your money like that you feel that way about. And we don't have to agree about what's good and what's bad. We just all have to agree that they're doing something with your labor, your work, your effort that you personally find morally reprehensible. And the person 180 degrees out from you feels the same way. So a nonprofit, you set that up, you set up a charter, you decide the good things you want done with that profit, and you put that money in there, and then their own rule book gets used against them. That's called smart design. This is how to run a nonprofit. I am not putting down somebody that went out and founded one and crushed it with it and just did it without even knowing what they're doing. I'm not putting that down at all. But I'm saying you've got to think strategically. And the big problem I see with a lot of young people in nonprofits, they have no idea why. A nonprofit is a structure. It's a legal structure. The two words I always use, tax attorney, CPA. That's who helps you make that decision, not your conscience. Because there's nonprofits that are screwing people over, and there's for-profits that are helping people, and vice versa. How many of you guys gave money to the Red Cross during the Haitian earthquake? You guys are smarter than me. I'm pretty upset about it now, but I let go because I've learned to do things smarter. I think we also need to comprehend what I call the interactive edge with the state or government. There's some things we can do outside the system, and some places we have to accept restrictions. And we use that like any edge that we have to interact with. And we should redefine for ourselves what a nation is. We think of a nation as a place with borders and laws and government. That's a state. A nation is a group united behind a common ideal. Now, I'm pretty happy to pledge my allegiance to the nation of permaculture. I think that is a valid nation. I think the ideology that links us together in spite of our differences makes us a pretty strong nation that's actually changing our world for the better. That seems a lot more important to me than a line on a map. We also need to be building what I call parallel systems, not competing systems. If you want to make things better and you don't think you can change the existing system, build another system and invite people into it. So what can you guys do? What can each of you do when you leave here? You've just had your mind crammed full of information. You've just met people. First of all, don't let go of the people you met. Commit that every person you got a name and an email from, next week when you're home, contact them and start developing that relationship. Please do that. Because if you don't, you're going to waste the biggest, most important part of this investment. Diego thanked me for helping people. I appreciate that. But I'll tell you, a lot of those people, I met them here. Contact me if we've talked. I might help you too. I really might. And the guy next to you might help you. And if you're sitting next to somebody you haven't met yet, when I finally shut my hole, turn to them and get their information. But the other thing you could do is grow something, anything, even herbs in a window, and get other people doing it. It's a disease. You make one green thing grow and taste it and like it better than what's in the store, you can't stop, right? Develop skills, knowledge, and social capital. Develop the skills, man, that's huge. And use skills to trick people into permaculture. We teach people to make cider out of cheap apple juice. People go, that's not permaculture. It's not. But they'll risk $5 to see if it works. And when it does, they start saying, how can I make this better? Then they learn about mead. Then they want bees. Then they start going to farmers markets. Then they're planting apple trees. Then they're planting pear trees. And I don't care if they ever decide to go full-on permaculture. What do I say? You take one step in the right direction. I'm just going to keep encouraging you to take another step and another step. Start a business. Make it profitable, and it does not have to be agricultural. This entire world needs permaculture thinking in every industry, not just growing stuff. We're probably the only people that can fix this. I don't say that arrogantly. I say that with a little bit of sorrow because it seems that we're the minority. And I'd like there to be multiple solutions. But I think this line of thinking that we all can agree on is the only way to actually fix not just environmental damage, but the damage that humans are doing to each other. Do you guys know that in history there have been wars fought over salt? There were wars fought over the control of routes to transport pepper. There were wars in this world over salt and pepper. Men killed men for salt and pepper. Has anybody ever seen a war over salt and pepper? Do you know why? Who has a hard time getting a hold of salt and pepper today? Anybody? When something's abundant, people stop fighting over it. The way we heal is with abundance thinking. And if you create abundance, it almost doesn't matter how it's distributed. If it's abundant enough, it gets distributed. I think we all need to invest in and support ethical businesses, even if they're not permaculture businesses. If you see someone that's doing good things with their business, be their customer, even if you don't need it. Give it away as a gift. We don't have a monopoly on ethics. We just have the best ethics there are. But we don't even have a monopoly on those. How many people really think we should be hurting people? How many people really think we should be hurting the planet? Like it's just okay. And how many people really think that you can just take from a system and take and never put anything back in and have it keep working? Not many. Those are human ethics. They're common ethics. That's why we have them. We've just crystallized them. They came from indigenous peoples all over the world, built the research and refined them down, distilled them down to that, and added the prime directive. I also believe a farm's first goal should be to feed the farmer or the farmer's family or the farmer's community. If we do that, the farmer actually has one thing they don't have to worry about anymore. How am I going to take care of everybody here? I don't think enough of that happens. I think we need to be like almost psychotic in this next one. We should be planting trees, bushes, vines, anywhere. Anyone will let us get away with it. And some places they won't. I really believe that. I'll stick a tree seedling in a public park. I'll stick it in a highway medium. I don't care. Wherever it is. I can plant millions of trees in my life that way. And if 10% of them stick around, that's good enough. I think we need to develop real economic literacy. What I loved about first two presenters tonight was how much they understood business. We need to understand business. Business isn't a bad thing. Business is a tool. I can use a shovel to grow a forest, or I can use a shovel to bury a person alive. The implementation of the tool is the issue. Business is how this world works right now. If we're going to exist in it, we need to understand economic literacy. We need to actually commit yourself to do this. Learn one financial term a day for the next year until you run out of terms. One a day. It'll expand your comprehension of the monetary system. Then you'll realize how messed up it is. And you'll get really motivated to replace it with something else. We also need to work with positive people. Find positive people anywhere you can and work with them. Come hang out with us. I've got a new Facebook group called the Regenerative Ag Group. You can go to bit.ly/regenag. We have one rule there. Be excellent to each other. And if you can't be excellent to each other, you can go be not excellent somewhere else. But that's the only real rule. We all are excellent to each other. And we need more of that in the world. And I want you to remember this. I said this last year, but I'm closing with it tonight because it's the truth. It's the honest truth. What we're doing is no longer a revolution. Revolutions transfer power from one group of leaders to another group of leaders. And the people that fight the revolution just end up with new people that rule them. And another word for being ruled is being owned. Insurrections seize the power from a group with power and put it in the hands of the people that fight the insurrection. That's you. That's what you're doing. I don't know if anybody told you that. I don't know if it's not what you signed up for, but that's what you're doing. And they can't starve you because you're planting trees, because you're growing food. That's how you win a battle, a conventional battle. You starve the enemy. You can't starve the farmers when they're learning to farm without technology that the mainstream uses. When they're being this creative. When the farmer's willing to grow food in your own backyard and you don't know what it looks like. And they can just go in there and eat it. That's what this is about. This is insurrectionist thinking in the most positive way it could be. And insurrectionists need weapons. We need weapons. These are a few of our weapons. I ran out of space on the slide. Mulch is our weapon. Mulch is our weapon. The most positive return of investment I've gotten on that property I showed you, that horrible property, has been from sheet mulching. The easiest thing I did. Kind of wish I'd never done any of the hard stuff now. See the little kid with the garden stuff, the carrots? Is carrots the weapon? No. Teaching a kid to garden is a weapon. They won't forget, I'm here because somebody taught me. Because my grandfather taught me. Showed me how to produce my own food. And then made me share it with other people. You do that with your kids. And the system can do nothing to stop them. Grafting. Love the guerrilla grafters you guys have in California. They're grafting productive fruit onto non-productive trees on public property. And then the state's mad about it. How dare you feed people? But grafting is a skill you can learn. Over there, those are apple seeds. Did you know that apple seeds actually grow apple trees? Did you know that the lie you've been told that if you plant a seed from an apple you just got, it's going to grow a terrible apple is a lie? That actually almost every seed you ever plant from an apple tree, if it matures and produces apples, is a good apple for something. It's useful. Most of them are quite palatable. If you go to Barking Frogs Permaculture and find a PDF that's a series from Bill Mullison's lectures in the 80s, you'll see him tell you that they grew tons of apple trees by picking cores up off the side of the road. And almost every one of them produced a good apple. I read that. It changed a lot of things for me. I'm like, why am I paying $30 for a tree? I can just eat apples and pull seeds out. I'll still pay $30 for a tree, but grow a lot of seeds too. Seed balls, those are our grenades. Right? That is my hand. And those little roots, that's a goji plant. Those things sell for like 15 to 20 bucks a piece. The way I got those roots is I cut the tip off, I stuck it in wet dirt. That's like 10 days. Those things grow in the desert in Utah alone by themselves. We could be growing those everywhere. They go down to like zone 4 and up to like zone 10. They're one of the best nutraceuticals you can grow. Why aren't we growing more of these? The chicken, right? The chicken can restore ground. The duck, love the duck, right? Isn't she pretty? That's just a pretty duck. The pigs, but the cows, all of this. These are our weapons. This is our arsenal. This is our quiver. And if you don't like this piece, use that piece. It's your palate. It's your choice. If there's something you're like, why didn't he put this up there? I ran out of space. I'm not anti whatever, your thing is. Go do that. And every single person in this room that wants to can crush it and can be successful by whatever you're judging success by. It might be the next time one of these goes on, you want to be up here. You can do that if you really want to. It might be you want a successful business. You can do that if you really want to. It might just be that you want a homestead that provides half the food for your family. You can do that if you want to. But I'm going to tell you something you're going to have a hard time swallowing when I say it, especially if you've never heard me talk about it before. And it's the reason why many of you won't. I'm going to tell you something, and when you have an adverse reaction to it, just remember I said that. You deserve what you want. And a lot of you just thought, well, not me. Yes, you do. Now, many of you also know I'm pretty hard on the entitlement attitude. I didn't say you were entitled to it. I said you deserved it. You just haven't done the work yet. But so many people don't understand. If they don't believe that they deserve something, they'll sabotage themselves. They'll prevent their own success. They'll talk themselves out of taking that leap, making that jump. because they don't believe they deserve it. Now, this isn't like motivational 101. I'm great, I'm wonderful, and everybody likes me, right? Because trust me, the more you do, you're going to find some people don't like you. It's okay. I don't like everybody either. But it is a fundamental truth of how the human mind works. If you don't believe that you deserve something, you will make sure that you don't get it. And if somebody drops it in your lap, you'll mess it up. That's why people that win the lottery end up broke. Because they don't believe that they deserve it, so they sabotage themselves. They don't have the literacy to take care of what they've won. So if you believe you deserve something, go get it. Nothing is really stopping you. No one's really in your way. If somebody is in your way, go around them. When I was in sales, my recruiter, when he was trying to sell me to a new company, said, why should we hire this guy? He said, because if they shut the door in his face, he takes the hinges off. That's how you have to be. Knock the door down. Dig a hole underneath you. You all have shovels, right? Get it done, guys. Make it happen. You guys are the insurrection, and I believe you deserve what you want. But I also know you're going to have to work for it. But if I can help any person here who's trying, I commit to you right now, I'll do it. Because it's the right thing to do. You may not want my help, but I'll give it to you if you do. I really will. And help each other. Thank you.